And Director Wray, welcome again to this committee, and I want to thank you and your agents for the good job you're doing to protect Americans. Earlier this week, I was part of the group that went out to visit Butler, Pennsylvania Homeland Security members. I agree with my colleagues that have said violence has no part in our democracy. And I trust you will investigate the events surrounding July 13th thoroughly. I'm going to ask you a question. I hope you keep it in mind as your investigation proceeds, which is, who's in charge? Who's in charge at a campaign rally, setting it up? Secret Service or a campaign? And I ask this question because when I was there, had a couple of law enforcement individuals alluding to that question as well. They gave me an example. They said, if a Secret Service says you need to set up a line of dump trucks behind the stage to serve, to protect the candidate, and the campaign says that's bad optics, who ends up winning the debate? So my question is, who's in charge? And as you investigate this crime scene, hope you ask the locally elected officials. I spoke to a county supervisor, local police and sheriff. They all had information they wanted us to know, to relay. We just didn't have the opportunity to sit down and talk to them. There was a lot of concern that they weren't given enough time to prepare for this rally. They thought there were things that could have been done better. And ultimately, what I keep thinking, what I keep coming back to is question, who's in charge at these rallies? I think it's an important one because we have an election right around the corner. Pennsylvania, Butler, these areas, battleground states around the country will continue to be areas where our candidates, both sides, will show up, and the threats will continue to be there. So I hope, Director Wray, that you'll keep that statement in mind as you continue to investigate this crime scene.
Well, I appreciate the question. I will tell you that we've conducted well over 400 interviews, but we have many more still to conduct. And as is not unusual in an investigation, I'm sure there will be situations where we have to go back to people we've already interviewed with follow-up questions. And our interviews cover a wide range of people. I do think it's important to make sure that the committee and the American people understand the scope of our investigation versus the scope of others. Our investigation is focused on the shooter and his attack. There is, of course, and I understand completely why, there are two separate reviews, one by the DHS Inspector General and the other by this outside independent panel that's been announced, that are focused on the security posture, the adequacy of the security posture at the rally, Secret Service decision-making and actions and things like that. And so I certainly understand why there are all those questions, but those are in scope of those two other reviews, and of course, whatever Congress chooses to do. Our investigation, though, because of our interviews of people who are on the scene, will relate to that in some ways, and we're going to share whatever we learn that's relevant with those other reviews.
Director A, my last minute that I have, I'm going to flip quickly to your good job resources. Earlier this year in the Appropriations Committee, you testified that you were, for 2024, your budget was $500 million below what you needed to sustain your 2023 efforts. A few minutes ago, you talked about foreign terrorists. The last few weeks, I know information has emerged. That information came from FISA information that was able to be collected overseas on these possible terrorist threats. What we have here today is a domestic terrorist, what looks to be a lone wolf. Your statements, there's nothing really there that would have tipped anybody off to this individual. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Well, I don't know that I'd go quite that far because we're still investigating a lot related to the shooter. It does appear so far that we're seeing less in his...
My 6 seconds, I would just say, I would ask that you let us know what resources you need to protect the American public and our candidates in our democratic system.
I appreciate the question. I would just say this. We are in, as I've said consistently today and for quite some time now, we are in an elevated threat environment covering a wide range of threats, and the FBI is central to protecting the American people from those threats. And state and local law enforcement, who depend on us every day, rely on us for all sorts of services, databases, forensic support, training. I could go on and on and on. And a lot of those departments, unlike the FBI, have had a hard time recruiting. And so this is not a time to pull back on our funding, because we're going to leave our brothers and sisters in state and local law enforcement twisting in the wind, and then by extension, the American people we're all collectively sworn to protect.
Thank you, and Mr. Chair, I yield.